So today's Monday morning, and the weather is all changed, and there is lightning storms going on and all kinds of things. But I've woken up this morning with a dream, and I've looked on Facebook. Someone else on the top of my newsfeed had a dream, and that's what a whelk looks like, by the way. And in that dream, it was very apparent to me that all this two-faced bullshit that people go on with is their own problem, and that everyone's projecting onto the outside world what they're paranoid about, kind of thing. And so what we don't see in ourselves, we see in other people, and these issues tend to manifest, and that keeps our lives all caught up in these little drama triangles, wondering what somebody really thinks compared to what they've said, wondering why things turned out so bad compared to how good things seemed when we first met and we projected what we have in common onto each other. But after a while it becomes apparent that what we have in common with each other is interpreted differently, and it's not really in common at all. And there's massive dislike tendencies. And so what starts out being, oh, we're so similar, turns into, well, actually there are these differences, kind of thing. So what I'm going to say this morning quite intuitively is that what's happened overnight is there's been loads of good weather in the outside world, loads of sunshine in the northern hemisphere, and then it suddenly changed. And just before this good spell of weather, there were sudden changes of really hot weather suddenly turning into really cold, and then back to really hot again. Blowing hot and cold, just like all those relationships. So there's something going on in the collective of how do you sort out all that inner stuff that people are unwilling to look at. Little whelks. So there's an inner plane. And what I realized this morning is everything to do with openness. I'm a deeply sensitive person who really tries to look at things from, even if I don't try to, I just do see things from other people's points of view. And a lot of what's been going on with me lately is looking back over stuff that goes years back, where my openness actually fucking terrifies people. Because if you have empathy, you can see what's really going on for somebody. Especially for somebody who's really closed in themselves and isn't really looking at their own stuff. But if you have empathy and just actually listen to what people are saying what their stuff is, and they're not listening to themselves, kind of thing. And we all do that to some degree. And there's a big life review going on these days. It's like we're all in fucking purgatory these days. And that was my feeling around COVID. It was a collective purgatory. It's like what we all have to go through when we die has been happening to the collective consciousness. And so we're all in a review of, oh, what really happened? Oh, where I fooled myself. Oh, I spent my whole life believing such and such and such and such on a conscious level, but subconsciously I was self-sabotaging, and subconsciously I was being sabotaged. Oh, look at these life lessons that I came down to learn in this lifetime, which the whole way through my lifetime